this is going to be recorded. So once again, if you feel like you missed something, you can go back, watch the recording. I'll upload it. I always upload I'll always upload all the sessions, and I just pick the best one. And what I mean by best one, in which the answers uh, are more analytical and have the best evidence, but also just technological issues. I always have a lot of them still when I'm recording these, so I always pick the one that seems to be um, the most organized. So here we are after break. So thank you guys. For those of you that went ahead and submitted your LEQ for extra credit, I'll go ahead and take a look at that, give you guys some extra credit points. By now, you guys have all heard of the LAUSD, their grading, right? Just a grading procedure. So I cannot give you any letter grade that is actually less than what you had on March, I believe, the 13th. So that's before we went on to our remote learning, right? So for example, if you were at a 85%, I can lower you to an 80%, but I can't give you a grade of a C, right? So just keep that in mind. I'm keeping that in mind. So hypothetically, let's say, for example, if you're at like a 95, 96%, I can't give you a grade that is less than an A, right? Even if you don't do any assignment from this point on, I can't. It's just the way that the system's kind of just been written, just because, obviously you guys are all here. You could partake in learning. And for those of you guys that have been turning in your stuff, excellent job, right? I mean, I've been grading you on it. I've been giving you guys on your LEQs, scoring you A, B, or C, right? However, one thing you do want to keep in mind, though, is that one of the things that we are still focused on is getting you ready for those AP exams. So, you could say that you're not going to do any of those study guides, but that's not going to be beneficial for you at all for the AP exam. Another thing to keep in mind, too, is letters of recommendation, right? Remember, your teachers, especially you guys being juniors, your teachers are going to be the ones that are writing you those letter rubrics. I'd say like 99% of you guys have done everything that you've needed to do, where I will write you the strongest letter recommendation. Make sure that we'll read through it together, where we feel that this is something that describes who you are and it shows your full potential, right? So keep that in mind. These are things that you want to write on your letter recommendation. Things that colleges love, or things that are saying like, hey, so-and-so is intrinsically motivated. We can use this as evidence, is that even though we've already clinched the A, you're still doing everything possible, not just for the AP exam, but just to make sure that you are meeting your full academic potential. So do the work. I know the study guides are a lot, but I would say do those study guides the way that's going to benefit you, right? I've been reading through them, and the purpose of me reading through them is number one, it's easier for some people just to hear things. Maybe they're doing right. Maybe they just like having another voice going through the content, and I do give some commentary. I'll say do your best to get those study guides done. With those study guides, you don't need to do the HIP analysis because we go through most of those primary sources in our Zoom sessions. What I would recommend that you do is just do the notes in the analysis sections, because there are a lot of great review videos out there. There's, Joe's Productions, there's Adam Norris. All those things are excellent. But I'll tell you what, if you could read something and put it in your own words, it's going to make it more meaningful for you. Therefore, you're going to be able to learn it for the AP exam. All right. So just keep that in mind. But also, this is the point: is if you're someone that's at a B, hey, keep doing that work. If you're at a C, because you could still continue to score points to bump you up. And I am being very, very generous here with rounding up scores. So if you are at like 88%, and I feel like, wow, they've done everything that they needed to do, I will go ahead and, and score you those points. Like I said, use your American pageant if possible, right? The more that you could be interactive, the better you're going to be. So let's go through the schedule. So for this week, all you have left is period 3, chapter 4 through 6. I'll have those readings done for you by Thursday. And let's try to aim for, by Sunday, is have those turned in, right? Let's try to have those turned in by the 19th. There is no SAQ, right? All you have to do is just have those reading questions turned in. Next week, we're going to do period 4. And you'll notice the way that these sessions are going to work is there's always going to be one Zoom session on content. The second Zoom session is always going to be DBQ work, right? That's how it's going to work from this point on for the rest of the week. And the reason is because the test is a DBQ. And I repeat that, the AP test is a DBQ, right? So before I move on, are there any questions about grades? Are there any questions about grades and the schedule? Anything. If there are no questions, just type no so I can move on. The 45-minute, that does include reading time. Yes, I'm going to go through that right now with all of you guys. But continue to do the work. Like I said, we're going to go through this learning procedure together. I'll still take attendance. What I occasionally might do is, if you're a student, let's say, for example, it's borderline, or like 85%, we'll say, you're not borderline, you're kind of far, but maybe I'll throw in some extra credit for you attending these Zoom sessions, right? So Elijah, what is due this week is just make sure you have, if you haven't done chapters period 2 in your book, make sure you do that, and also period 3. That's going to be, hopefully try to have that done by Thursday, right? So Jeffrey says too much. Well, I mean, it's an AP course, that's kind of, my goal is to get you guys 4s or 5s for this test. That's the most important thing. So you guys can handle it. And I have confidence now that everyone that's been in this course so far has. And, if you're going through a lot, like let's say with, I understand it's been a stressful time, and just try your best. That's all I'm saying. Try your best, come in with a positive attitude. I'm confident that we're all going to do well on this, right? Even if you just need a vent, shoot me an email, vent to me. But I think it's more important that we stay positive. So if there are no questions, I'm going to move on. So the next thing that I want to go over is this 2020 APUSH exam, right? So this is just going to go over the basics here. So here's the situation. So this year's APUSH exam will be a 5-document DBQ. This is held on May 15th. The test will last 45 minutes. Yes, the test will last 45 minutes, right? It will be on a topic of periods 3 to 7. So the years of 1754 and 1945. So one thing I want you to keep in mind is, and I saw Daniel put on the chat, is no periods 1 and 2. You could still use periods 1 and 2, as well as 8 and 9 for contextualization. So that's the reason why we are going to review a little bit of period 2, right? Because you could use it as a contextualization. I have no idea what the question is going to be. I have no idea what the topic is. All I know, it could be between the periods of 3 to 7. Might AP make it a multiple period DBQ? They might do that. Or they might go ahead and just make it off one period. I have no idea. So that's why it's imperative that we do our readings, that we do the reviews, right? So here's the things that you could use. Any questions for that? So really quick, just type no. There are no questions on the format of the exam so far. Good. So we know it's a DBQ. We know it's 5 documents, 45 minutes, 5 minutes of upload time, right? So what I've done for you guys here, and actually, I'm going to cite this. This is the work from a lot of teachers that have edited this document over and over and over. I made some changes to best fit their kids, but these are a lot of resources for you here that I recommend that you use. Category 1 is content review. Category 2, which I put in later, is skills review. So these are all things that you could use for content review. So as you're going through that study guide that I've given you guys, if you want to do a different variation of it, you can. That's fine. I mean, if you don't want to use the AMSCO book, that's fine. Use your American Pageant. But the thing is, you got to make sure that you are being active with the content. If you just read through it, you're not going to be successful with it. You're not going to retain it. You have to make sure that you're doing some form of activity with it. Otherwise, you're just going to forget it. It's going to go in one ear, out the other, right? It's active studying, and if you've taken a psychology course, it's called semantic encoding, right? So a couple things that you could use your materials, your class notes, textbook, anything that you've done from this year. What I suggest that you do is look at terms, section questions, meaning your reading questions, then either write or speak about all that you know without looking at it, right? it's a brain dumping of some sort. So once again, you're being active with it. If you just read through it, you're not going to get anything from it. It's going to go out the ear, one ear, out the other. Quiz yourself on it. Do Quizlets, right? Use your note cards as you're going through there. Ask yourself, the halfway covenant, be able to define it and then test yourself on it. So be active with your studying. Another thing that you could use is Gilderman's APUS website. It is very good. It has a good set of timelines, essays, primary source documents from every APUSH period. So one thing that you could do is read through the primary sources. Ask yourself, what terms do I know that are related to this? That's excellent DBQ practice. One thing you could also do is look at the key concepts for each period, then write down and talk about concepts to support each concept. For your study guides, you'll notice the key concepts are all the way in that far left corner. One thing that you could do is use the Gilderman website, go through the periods, and then just take notes and then answer those analysis questions using that website, right? You have videos. One thing that you could also do is watch Adam Norris or Joe's Productions AP videos are 10 to 12 minutes long, broken by period, and then use the study guide that I gave you to take notes, right? Watch them, pause, and quiz yourself. Once again, it has to be active, right? So all of these are great. There's Quizlets right here. These are all things that you could do for content review. The AMSCO book, fantastically written. There are some teachers, not even joking with you guys, that use this as their AP textbook, right? So that's the reason why I'm giving this to you, because I think it's gaining popularity, and a lot of teachers. So if you struggle with the American pageant reading, then this is something that synthesizes more big picture, right? Myself, using me as a resource. If there's something that you don't get, I'd say attend these Zoom sessions. I think it's helpful. It's really going to be more helpful. And one of the things too, I think one thing that you have here is a lot of these sessions that we're doing is this is more of you guys talking. When you're looking at your notes, right? The chat notes I always put in. Some of the things that some of these students are saying, like I remember there were a few sessions ago that I made sure that I put Kalen's comments when he was analyzing some of the documents because they were right on. And reading some of the students' LEQs, right, for extra credit, I mean, it showed that it really did benefit. So, learning off of each other. Try your best to attend these sessions. I'll continue to give you guys points, right? Skills reviews. All right. Any questions off that? Any questions? If there are no questions, type no. All right. So now my dogs are excited. We are going to go over the rubric, right? We are going to go over the rubric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a quick summary of this. And then what we'll do afterwards is I'll actually click on the actual rubric, right? So big picture, the opening paragraph is the exact same. Contextualization, thesis. If you have those things, those are 2 points, right? So that stays the same. Documents, this is a big change. Remember, time has gone down to 45 minutes. 45 minutes total. That's with reading time. You only have 5 documents. There's usually 7. So now you only have 5 documents, right? So you get 1 point for describing the content of 2 documents and how they relate to the prompt. So if you go ahead and you summarize 2 documents and you explain how they are related to the prompt, you are not even making a connection to the thesis, you score 1 point, right? So you get 2 points for connecting 4 documents to your thesis. You get 2 points for primary sourcing. You get 2 points for bringing in outside evidence, 1 for each piece of evidence, and then another point for complex understanding. So this rubric is now 10 points instead of 7. I am going to go through this in detail in a minute, right? So remember, our old rubric had 7 points. Now we are making this 10 points. So now you're probably wondering as well, how do I typically score a 1, 2, 3, or 4? Well, this is how you do this. So if you score a 9 out of 10 on this rubric, you will more than likely score a 5, right? So your goal is a 5. You got to score close to that 9. You got to score at least 9 points, and we'll go through on how to do that. If you are scoring a 7 to 8, right, that's a 4. If you are scoring half the points, that puts you at a 3. And then if you are scoring 3 to 4 points, that puts you at a 2, and 0 to 2 points, that gives you a 1, right? Any questions at all about the scale and how this is broken up? So I'm going to give you some time to look through that. Then I'm going to open up the actual rubric. Any questions? If there are no questions, type no. All right. So this is the actual rubric, and it's not the actual one. It's actually broken down to help you guys, but it goes into more detail than that scoring I just gave you. So we're not going to do, I would say, a actual DBQ every week. We're going to break these skills down, and then every other week, or maybe every 2-3 weeks, yeah, or probably every other week, then we'll go ahead and maybe try to do them, but not every week. That's just too much. So remember, the first thing is contextualization. You have to give me 3 to 4 sentences that are giving the broader historical developments or processes before or during, and then make the connection to the question. So I repeat that. One of the things that you guys have done a great job is giving me the content. Think about 3 to 4 sentences on note cards, but you also have to relate it to the question. The one thing that you guys, I would say, are forgetting to do is make the connection to the question. All right, so for example, if the question is on World War I, you might discuss imperialism, the white man's burden, but then bring the connection on how it relates to World War I. You know, if you then say imperialism, which would then lead us to World War I, yeah, that would score, right? There's 1 point for that. So you are also given 1 point for the thesis. A couple things. It needs to be a defensible claim that responds to the prompt. So you actually need to answer the prompt. You can't restate the prompt. You're not going to score. You also need to establish a line of reasoning, right? So you need to give me the outline of how you're going to address the question. So for example, our prompt later is going to be evaluate the extent to which English colonial societies in the New England and Chesapeake regions prior to the 1700s were similar. So if you say that New England and Chesapeake colonies were similar in regards to motivations for colonization, however, they were different in regards to religion and economic policy. Bam, that scores a point, right? You've answered the question and you've outlined for me how you're going to address that. Okay? Questions at all about that? Those first 2. If there are no questions for those first 2, just type no. Okay. So that stays the same. Now, this is how this is different. All right. So there are 3 possible points that you could get for use of documents. 3 possible points, right? So the first thing is, if you describe the content of 2 documents and why they connect to the prompt, right, you are going to score 1 point. So the way I'm going to go ahead and do this is, if I'm looking at this, and let's say I notice that Luis uses document 1 and document 3, meaning he just describes it, right, and then he just tells me how it's connected to the overall prompt. I mean, in other words, yeah, you're going to go ahead and score that point, right? So if you do those points right, let's say you do your thesis, your contextualization, and you hit that 1 point, you describe 2 documents, you're at 3 already, right? Now, let's say, for example, if you go ahead and you use 4 documents, right? And within those 4 documents, 4 out of 5, you are using that to support your thesis. Guess what? You go ahead and earn 2 points right there. So if you use documents 1, 2, 3, and 4, you will earn 2 points, right? And then what you also go ahead and you earn right here is you need to, of course, do your sourcing. So remember with your sourcing, this is what I want to make clear, is you have to use one of these: point of view, historical context, intended audience, or purpose. But here you need to make sure you explain how it's relevant to the thesis. So for example, if the document that I'm going over is, we'll say the Mayflower Compact, and then you were to give me the historical context of the breakup of the Anglican Church, and now you are getting people that end up going to that as a result to have religious tolerance and be free of religious toleration, they move over to the New World. You would need to explain how that's relevant to your thesis. This is relevant to my thesis as it shows motivation for people to settle in the New England colonies, right? So 2 things that you needed to, or that's 1 thing that you need to make sure that you're doing for the sourcing. add these elements, but also how it's relevant to the thesis. And we're going to go through that. So if you do everything perfectly here so far, let's say you describe the content of 2 documents, and then you go ahead and you support 4 documents, right? So these 2 points right here, 1 and 2, I mean, they could go in together. And then you hip, that's 5 points. You would be at an 8 right there. You would be at 8 right there. Questions so far? So yeah, because we're looking at 2, 4. Yeah, no, yep, we're good. And then here's the thing that we want to make sure we understand is you need to bring in 2 pieces of evidence, right? You need to bring in 2 pieces of evidence. Yes, outside evidence. This is one major change. 2 pieces of outside evidence, right, to support the thesis outside of those documents. This is something that's easier for you guys, I think. This actually makes a DBQ easier. The response must describe the evidence, must use more than a phrase or a reference. No, this cannot be the same as contextualization, right? So let's say, for example, if we're going through a document on reconstruction and all of those documents don't mention black codes and you know information on black codes, bam, you could go ahead and use that as evidence, right? Let's say, for example, they don't mention Plessy versus Ferguson, bam, then you could go ahead and mention that no card term. So, and the good thing is 1 point for each. So if you only mention one, then you will at least still score a point. It's a little bit different from the other ones, right? Yes, you would have to explicitly state it. So I need to be, as a reader, I need to make sure that this is something that is outside the realm of those documents, right? So you want to make sure that it is explicit, right? Don't infer. You make sure the reader knows exactly what you're talking about. And then this complex understanding, don't worry about this. You know, I mean, we've talked about it before. You know, if it's asking for similarity and you state some contrast, yeah. If it's asking for continuity and you address changes, you'll go ahead and score that, right? So you're looking at, that's how you score those points. So you're scoring here. 1 point for contextualization, 1 point for thesis, right? So that we're at 2. Then you could go ahead and earn up to 2 points for documents, right? So it puts us as 4. And then 2 points for hip, right? So that puts us at 6, right? 8 now. Actually, sorry, I forgot to describe points over there. So yeah, so that puts us at 10 points. Okay. Any questions at all about the rubric? Biggest difference is outside evidence. You need to mention 2 outside evidence, and then of course you need to make sure that the scoring changes for how many documents you use. If you use 4, supports your thesis, you score 2 points, right? And then if you just describe, you score 1, right? And then hip is still the same, but now you're using 2. Or yeah, still using 2. I believe last time it was 3. Any questions at all about this rubric? If there are no questions, type no. I think this is way easier than the other rubric. I think it's significantly easier. I mean, think about this. If, like, let's say, hypothetically speaking, if you give me, and here, let me go back to this document right here. So let's say, for example, if you give me the contextualization thesis, this is the thing that we've been working on the whole year. Then you accurately describe 2 documents, right? You don't even support your thesis. You just describe 2 documents. You're at a 3 already. And then what you end up doing is you give me 2 pieces of outside information because those other documents don't make sense. You're already at a 5 and you pass the exam, right? Yes, I'm going to repeat that. If you give me contextualization, thesis, you describe 2 documents, you're at a 3, and then let's say you bring in 2 pieces of outside information that aren't even in those documents, that puts you to 5, you already passed the exam. But this gives you that scoring breakdown of how you will earn that 10 out of 10. 1 point for contextualization, 1 point for thesis, 1 point for accurately describing, and you get 1 or 2 points for supporting the thesis with 4 documents, or 1 or 2 points here with the hip analysis. Because remember, they're being lenient here now. With the old rubric, it was kind of like all or nothing. But now, even if you just do 1 accurately, you will still score a point. Outside evidence, even if you only give 1 accurately, you will at least still score a point. So this is a lot more student-friendly. Questions at all? If there are no questions, type no. So, and this is, I already went over context and thesis. But let me go over document use. Remember when you are document use, so because we're going to go through this one, don't quote the documents, interpret them, right? Avoid referring to them as document 1 or document A, rather use the source information, okay? And then we're going to go through the HIP and all of this a little bit later as we go through the rest of the DBQ. I'm going to come back to this and it's going to become redundant, but I want you guys to become pros in this. A couple resources. We have a helpful 9-minute video on the DBQ. So more videos. These are some exemplars, right? Here's a sample, and then here are the responses. This is for the old rubric, but allows you to see what a 7 and a 3 and a 1 look like, right? Another great resource that we have here. Luis, can you elaborate on your question? Just unmute yourself.
So, like, you know how, like, in the end of each of our, like, when we would write normally our essays, we would put, like, document 1 parentheses to, like, state what evidence we're pulling it from?
Yeah, you definitely can. You definitely can. You just want to make sure, though, that in general, that so you could do that. I mean, you could say document 1, document 2, but just make sure that you're not writing word for word what the document says. That when you're describing it, that you're generally giving me a summary, but also you relate it back to the thesis. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So if you want to help the grader kind of navigate, that's fine. Okay. Other questions? Great question. So we're not going to watch this video, but if, like, let's say you're like, Burba, that you went through that very quickly, and I'm kind of lost. Well, go back. You can check out this video. It goes over that rubric once again. You know, the exact same thing I went over. And there's multiple videos I put on that other resource to help you out. Okay. There are no questions. Type it. So, any other questions? I'm only getting Mia that says no. So, anyone else? All right. Very good. So, we went over the AP rubric. So, what we are going to do now is we are going to go ahead and just to break things up a little bit with our session. Let's go ahead and we're going to play a game of Kahoot. We are going to play a game of Kahoot. Winner will get extra credit. So do me a huge favor. If you earn extra credit in the last session, shoot me an email after this so I can implement that extra credit. For some of you, it's not going to matter because some of you guys are literally at like 120%, right? But if you are borderline, or not even if you are borderline, but let's say you're like 80%, you know, and you want to work your way up to that A, just shoot me an email so I can make sure that I check and give you the extra credit. Well, let me give my dogs a treat because they keep barking. Sit. Come here. There you go. All right. So let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and get this game of Kahoot started. This is all period 2, right? And you're probably wondering, well, Burba, why are we doing period 2 Kahoot? Well, here's the reason why, is because we can still use this for context. And I'm also, this period 2 Kahoot is also going to be a lot of document analysis. You will need to, of course, read through these documents very quickly, right? Because you only have 45 minutes when it comes down to real test time, okay? So what I'd like you guys to do, we are going to play this game of Kahoot. I've went ahead and I've given you guys the link to this Kahoot so you can play numerous times. But let me go ahead and get this set up for you guys. So if you've forgotten a lot of this, you still might be okay. And also, a lot of this is in your study guide. All right. So what I'd like you guys to do is join at kahoots.it with that game pin. Once you're in, type your name. Once we have 17 participants, that's when I know we get started. Some of these questions we'll spend a minute on. Some of them might be quicker, right? But it's, like I said, good document practice. I will have more of an update later on in terms of how you guys will access um, and actually take the exam on the 15th. So the date of the exam is now May 15th. May 15th, May 15th, right? Um, as you guys are signing into this Kahoot, on the message that I sent you guys, there's a Google form. Please do me a huge favor and fill out that Google form, not now, but sometime today. And reason being is because Ms. McGee wants to get a record of who has a desktop and a laptop and who doesn't. So that way, if you don't have a laptop or desktop, we could hopefully try to get you one because it's going to make it, I think, a lot easier to access the exam. Okay. We still have two more people, so please go ahead and join. Okay. So we're missing 2 people. Give you guys about another minute. Who are we missing? All right, we have 1 more. So remember, so the way this will work is it's stimulus based, so you can read through it. You'll have 1 minute to read through it, and then the other questions that come with the stimulus will be about 20, 30 seconds because you should have already read the stimulus. All right, 16, so that's it. All right, here we go. Oh no, it's not working. Is it working? There we go. Hey. All right, the correct answer is mercantilism. Very good. So these are all documents that some of them showed up in DBQs in the past, right? So let's go to the next question. Scoreboard, good job. Daniel in the lead. Oh, 1 second, guys. My computer's lagging. No, come on. We'll wait. Let's go. Technical difficulties. Yeah, these are all your documents that we have here. So, any suggestions? Okay, it's not going. Yeah, it's hating me. The Mac never does this. Give you 1 second. I think we're gonna have to. Let me see. We might have to restart it. Let me check. If it is, we all know what the first one is, right? So, were you guys kicked out? Okay. I got it working again, so give me 1 second, guys. Okay. Do you guys see? Okay, do you guys see the Kahoot screen? Okay, excellent. So here we go. We're gonna restart it again. Apologize for that. Here we go. There's a new code. We're at 15, missing 2 more, I believe. You guys about another 30 seconds to join. Okay, that it? We only have 16? One more? Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get this started. So if we're waiting on you, just watch the screen and just try your best. All right, here we go, perfect. You all should know the answer, right? Very good. Next question. Michelle seemed or Kaylin in the lead. Very good. So with those first questions, that stimulus for period 2, one of the things that you can set into context is specifically the type of governments that existed prior to the American Revolution, right? You could talk about the House of Burgesses, town halls. Then eventually they would, of course, go against the monarchy because that neglect of Great Britain would stop, right? Monarchy would stop. All right, so excellence. So with that question, what you want to look at is, of course, they're talking about the institution of slavery, right? But the best way to really study his argument would be looking at primary sources, more specifically their narratives. Very good. Next question. Yep, and then the correct, if you wanted to use the academic vocabulary, slave codes would be what the American Pageant calls it, right? That's how they were able to just keep the slaves um, in check. And remember, at first, slaves were indentured servitudes, but there would be that change that would go on due to Bacon's rebellion. That was a tough one. While all those are decent answers, that one's specifically looking at forest and lumber. I mean, they brought that up numerous times for them. So, but the next one is a little bit easier. Same document. Actually, you don't even need to know that. So all of them are correct except for middle plantation economies. Remember, plantations would be primarily the South. When you're thinking middle colonies, major differences. Middle colonies, think about religious freedom. When you're looking at New England colonies, think Puritan, very strict. The correct answer will be conflicts. Yep, with Americans, or I guess you could say just with the British. over land resources, political boundaries. King Philip's War is very important because this is when you're going to really get down the breakdown of the Native Americans. Right, it's kind of, I guess you could say, one of the last uh, wars that we're getting with expansion of the British. All right, keep that document in mind because here we go. And remember, keep the document in mind. Oh, actually, I'm going to skip this one. Yeah, there was a better answer. Sorry. That's a typo on my part. Let's go to the next one. Same document. All right. So with both of these, you are looking at grievances, right? You're looking at grievances, and you're also looking, I guess you could say, you could bring up political grievances, right? Boundaries, right? So that would fall in political under spice. Although, I mean, Massacre at Wounded Knee would be the next best answer, but that document isn't leading to the war yet. Right? Or it's not the war, it's leading up to it. So notice the except. Very good. Royal monarchs, because you're starting to see here just some rules of governance, right? Think about John Locke's social contracts. Same document. Last one, this one should say congregational churches. Yep, it would be the democratic structure of the newly formed New England Congregational Churches. The next best, theocracy of new, I mean, if it's a theocracy, then you're kind of looking at a government that's ruled specifically off of religion. I mean, it's, although religion is an important part, it's not necessarily democratic. Dominion of New England can't be, I mean, because remember, this dominion was kind of just more formed just to fight off the natives. All right, so let's look at these scores. Daniel, Lon, Kalen, and Andres, followed by Michelle. Same document. Of course, be the spread of Enlightenment ideas that was going on in Europe, right? And this would, of course, be a cause of the American Revolution. All right, very good. Yep. When we're talking about imperial system, of course, we're looking at the monarchy. Very good. Something you want to make sure that you understand for period 2 is mercantilism. I'd say it's probably the most important concept. Is that, of course, economically, all policies are going to be made to benefit the mother country. Our resources coming from the new world to the old world, then manufactured goods going to the new world. But of course, it's made to benefit the native country, the mother country. Next question. Very good. So you want to understand period 2 is all about the rise of self-governance, town halls, House of Burgesses. Some of these, the monarchy would, of course, go ahead and dissolve because they don't like that representation. Looking at our scoreboard, Daniel, Lon, Andres, Kalen, and then Michelle. Next question. Very good. So remember, salutary neglect, right? Prior to these policies, they let the colonies do whatever they wanted. Then we start to get some changes, right? Very good. Oops, sorry, I should let you see the score. My bad. Highest degree of religious toleration. It's great content. Middle colonies. New England, very strict. Think about them, very Puritan. Next question. Straight content. Roger Williams. Yeah, straight content. Remember, think middle colonies, more tolerance. He also allowed natives to we get to buy off their land. It's Daniel in the lead, followed by Lon, followed by Kalen, followed by Andres, followed by Michelle. Very good. Of course, it is Bacon's Rebellion. Excellent. Remember, indentured servitude is something that you want to make sure you understand. We did a simulation on this. And indentured servitude is very important understanding this period. Here we go. Very good. Halfway covenant. So remember, the Puritan Church was losing a lot of influence because there were very few people that would reach conversion, which means enlightenment by God, right? So they made the restrictions a little bit easier, and they allowed half memberships, which would be the halfway covenant. Next best answer would be Great Awakening. That was a time period where you're getting this religious revival, getting these emotional speakers, right, that are less traditional. All right, so let's look at our score. We've got Daniel, Lon, Andres, Kalen, followed by Michelle. Indentured servants were they were not slaves. They would not necessarily buy their freedom, but remember, they were given their freedom after their contract was fulfilled. Then they would go ahead and typically be given land. But the issue that we get with indentured servants was that moving westward, right? That would be Native American land. And they couldn't expand westward. The king didn't necessarily allow it, right? Which is why you'd get Bacon's Rebellion, and which will also be a cause of the Revolutionary War later. Very good. So we have Michelle, Andres, Kalen, Juan, and Daniel. 2 more questions. They supported the Anglican Church. Yep, this would be the southern colonies. Remember, the New England colonies would be more Puritan, right? Middle colonies would have a lot more religious diversity, right? Very good. Daniel, followed by Lon, Kalen, Jeffrey, and Michelle. We're least likely to influence the American Revolution. The correct answer would be Great Awakening. House of Burgesses would not, because remember, or does influence the American Revolution because it's a form of representative government, right? Taxation without representation. Town hall meetings, same thing. Mercantilism, economically, we were very upset because just the colonies weren't allowed to freely trade with the French or the Dutch, right? Because everything had to favor England. The Great Awakening, that was more of a religious revival, right? I would say that was kind of just different from, it doesn't necessarily deal with the American Revolution. So, questions. All right, well, our final score is Daniel in first place, followed by Lon, followed by Kalen. do me a huge favor, guys. Go ahead and email me. I'll give you guys extra credit to add on to your scores. Very good. Very good. Okay. So, let's go ahead, and I want to move on to the last thing. Then we are done. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to do some DBQ practice. So we're not going to actually do a DBQ, but what we're going to do is we're just going to analyze some documents, right? And I mean, eventually, one of the things that might happen is you might notice that some of these documents actually show up on your actual DBQ. That would be great, right? But this is all just making sure we're going through the cognitive process. So what I'd like you to do is what I've actually done is I've went ahead and I put something called DBQ, and as well as Kahoot period 2. I posted on Schoology if you want to open that up, or if you want to open up this PowerPoint. But this PowerPoint, I mean, it does have the answers on it, so it's not going to help you if you just look at the answers. But let's go through the cognitive process together, all right? But before I move on, are there any questions? If there are no questions, just type no. All right. So I have the documents on the slide. So here's our prompt. Evaluate the extent to which the English colonial societies in the New England and Chesapeake regions prior to 1700 were similar to another. So this is, if I'm doing this DBQ, automatically I'm thinking this is a compare and contrast question. What I'm going to do is when I'm going through these documents, I need to go ahead and look at these two things. And number one, just while I'm annotating this, just briefly summarize it, but as well as how does the document address the prompt? That's what it should say, major typo. So first thing is summarize the document as well as how does it address the prompt, meaning how could I use this to answer the prompt? So you need to be able to compare and contrast the New England colonies and also the South, the Chesapeake regions, right? The Southern colonies. So what I'd like you guys to do is let's work through document one together. I'm going to give you guys, let's say this is a quick one, 2-3 minutes. Summarize it for me as well as how does it address the prompt, and I'll call on some random people. All right. So I'll give you guys 2 minutes. Go for it. Here's some music. If you don't like the music, just put on mute. Then I'll put in chat when we'll discuss. But just type your responses in the chat, please. So go for it. Send the copy out. All right, I'm gonna stop it right there. Excellent. So Let's go with Daniel. Can you kind of just summarize the document for me? Or let's go Daniel. Sorry, not Daniel, because I called on Daniel already. Daniel, how summarize this for me? Because I think you did a pretty good job.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so the first document, if you see the source, it says by Puritan man. So you could already tell that it's from the New England colonies. And then in the chapter, like chapter 3, when it described the New England colonies, you'll see that like within New England colonies, they're smaller, they're clumped together because of like the farming land wasn't very strong. So they had towns and villages, so you could see that. And then you could also see that form of religious structure by saying that by God's grace, we will be able to have walkways for the church. And then these families would have to be in the presence of the church.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows like the New England colonies and their ways of connecting the church with the land that they have and how the New England colonies would tend to live.
Yes, excellent. So that last statement that you just said right there, I think sums it up, right? So one thing that you could say is the Articles of Agreement, right, lays out the religious foundation of the Puritan colonies in New England, as well as the outline, right, the structure of it. So very good, excellent. So the main important thing is that I would go ahead. What I'm cognitively doing is I would annotate this. I would say the main thing is religion, right? So who wants to tackle this one for me? How does this, because remember, you need to address the prompt. You need to explain how this document relates to the prompt. How? Can I get a volunteer? Just raise your hand. How does this relate to the prompt? How would you use this to answer the question? Yeah, so we're not sourcing yet. I mean, we'll work on sourcing on Thursday. We're going to alternate skills every time. So how could we relate this to the prompt? Any idea? You don't even need to just give me your strategy. How might you do this? What do you think? Let's go with Andres. How might you approach this?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
So how would you relate this to the prompt?
Well, I think that in regard to like the prompt, like I guess we can. I think like what Daniel was talking about, we could talk about how like the source specifically talks about Puritans, and therefore like that's obviously a relationship to the prompt insofar that it talks about like New England colonies. I think we can also talk about like um to the like the question is like evaluate the extent in which the English colonies and societies in New England and Chesapeake were similar to one another. And I think we can like talk about it and talk about compare and contrast the ways and the ways that different religions have influenced over society. Like we can say obviously this prompts like supports the fact that like that religion had a great influence on the ways that society was structured insofar that land was literally split up and due to the divinity of God. And so I think we could like talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. So one thing that you could mention is you could talk about similarities in religion or perhaps differences in religion, right?
Yeah.
Remember, New England was Puritan. What were the Chesapeake regions? Just type in the chat box. What faith did they have? Excellent. Anglican, right? So these are some things how you could use document one. So looking at the document, or a better way to state this would be looking at the agreement. It provides a religious and social agreement in the New England colonies, talking about Puritan, right? So you could use this to compare and contrast with the chartering of the colony in Chesapeake region. So one thing you could do is look at the motives, right? I might argue that while the New England colonies were more for religious purposes, the chartering of the Chesapeake region, which was the southern one, remember, it started as a joint stock company. You could argue it was more for economic reason, right? And then just like we said, we could compare and contrast the role of religion, right? And then you could also compare politically, right? The town meetings to the House of Burgesses, right? Town meetings were more in the north, and in Virginia, you'd get the House of Burgesses, right? So these are some things that you could do here. All in all, cognitively, what I'm doing through these documents is as I'm writing this, I'm kind of just writing in the margin, just a brief summary for it, very brief, but also think about spice. How are we going to use this? Are you going to use this as a religious, economic, political pairing, right? Similar, difference. Okay. Any questions about that document? If there are differences, if there's any questions, type them. So with this, I'm going to tell you right now, town meetings and House of Burgesses, they're not mentioned in any of the documents later on. So those are some things that you could use as a comparison, right? Some of these other ones you might be able to see, right? So And you'll see this as we go through a document. But let's take a look at document 2. This is a pretty quick one. So let's do the same thing. And remember, what we're working on here is just summary and how does it address the prompt? How might we be able to use this? And think about compare and contrast. So give you guys about a minute, minute and a half. Here's some Disney music for you guys. Mhm. All right, I'm going to stop it here for time. Michelle, can you kind of just sum up this document for us?
I don't know if I'm right, but I think this document was just talking about how there's more people going to like New England colonies with their families, because it just says here that there's a ship list and there's mainly like men with their like families. So I think this document is just talking about how families are going together to the New England colonies.
Yes, very good. So I think Jesse, I mean, your answer was excellent, right? I mean, you're absolutely right, and so is Jesse's. The document addresses the people who are going to New England, and they're mostly families searching for a new opportunity, right? That's the biggest difference, and I see that Kaylin addressed here as well in the prompt. Is you could compare and contrast how these migration patterns are similar and different to the Chesapeake, because as we know, the Chesapeake colonies were more individuals; they were less families, right? So summary, the document provides a list of immigrants from England to the New World. One can note that they are mostly families. How can we use this? Compare and contrast those who emigrated to Chesapeake colonies. Outside information that you could use: John Smith, John Rolfe. You can look at Georgia as a buffer colony, tobacco planters, right? You could even make this, and for those last two, you could make the connection to the previous document, right? The last colonies, or the New England colonies, was more religious, as mentioned through the Puritan purpose. But this one, if you were to mention John Smith and John Rolfe, that was purely more economic. Questions on that, right? So let's look at the next document. This is a pretty quick one. So this is, yeah, go for it. That's it. All right, let's go. Let's take a look at this one. Let's go with let's go Angel. Oh. So how would we summarize this document, and how would we use it?
So compared to like the previous document, so document 2, where it was mostly families, this one was mostly just like single men that's going. So I guess that's like the contrast.
Yeah. So one of the things that you could argue is, I mean, you could make the connection to the previous document. So one of the things that you could mention in your thesis could be migration patterns, right? New England was more family, while this was obviously more single men, right? Why were they more single men rather than full families? Any idea why? And of course, they're still Christians. They're supporter of the Anglican Church, right? Okay, we could talk about birth rate, but what was the motivation for the Southern colonies? Economic, right? Economic. Remember, a lot of them were indentured servants. So I think this document is very powerful, right? So one of the claims that you could bring up, you could use this document in numerous ways. You could argue religion, right? Because it says here the conformity and discipline of the Church of England, right? Sorry, does it say let me? Yeah, here we go. Touching the conformity to the church discipline of England. So you could already argue here that there is a religious difference according to these two documents. Chesapeake was Anglican, New England was Puritan, but you could also argue that it's different migration patterns, right? That these men are going for economic purposes, while you look at document 1, it was more for, of course, for the will of God, right? Questions at all about that? 1617, I mean, you could argue that's not too young, right? So, summary document provides us with a list of the first immigrants to Chesapeake colonies. Most are men, also followers of the Church of England. How can we use? You can compare it with document 1 and document 2, right? You can compare the religious motives versus the economic motives, or you could also look at document 1 and 2, just those patterns. Okay. Let's do one more document, and then we'll call it a day. You know what? Let's go to this one actually. Let's go to document 5. So go for it. So remember to tell me summary and how it's relevant to the prompt, like how can you use it? Mhm. All right. Kaylin, can you sum up this document for us?
Definitely. We have here essentially a first person source from Bacon, who essentially was the leader and the organizer of Bacon's Rebellion. And we know that that event essentially was caused by the grievances of Western farmers living in the frontier. And here, I mean, Bacon sums it up perfectly. There's this this discrepancy of the dispensing of the country's wealth, and essentially is addressing these grievances to essentially the people who are more wealthy and the richer owners of these plantations in more inward towards the seaboard. And the second part of the article talking about the Native Americans and how they were always along the border of colonies and Americas. And that's essentially the summary of the article. And the reason why this is significant is we look at the source, columnist and leader of rebellious volunteer militia in Virginia. So we have a very, it's localized in the sense that it connects to the Chesapeake colonies, especially due to the differences, inherent differences in the Chesapeake colonies versus the New England colonies. But this is essentially something that occurred all along the frontier of the colonies.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. So thank you for bringing it up. So this document, main thing you understand, Nathaniel Bacon discusses the issues of wealth inequalities while struggle with the Native Americans. And you could use this, once again, to compare and contrast economic versus religious purposes, right? This wealth inequality exists in the South because the primary focus of the Southern colonies was, remember, tobacco, those large plantations, right? One thing that I'm also glad that you mentioned is a similarity you could bring in between both is issues with Native Americans, right? You could talk about in New England, it was more of converting some of the Native Americans' religious practices, while in the South, it was more for economic, right? You're getting Bacon's Rebellion. They're upset because they can't move westward. Remember, William Berkeley wants to go ahead, and this is in the South, right? He wants to maintain good relations with the Native Americans because as a wealthy plantation owner and farmer, it's stronger trade relations with them, right? So yeah, those are all things that you could bring up. But this activity, what we worked on here is number one, summary of the documents, but also number two is making sure that we're explaining how it's relevant to the overall question, right? So if you notice the process when we're going through these documents, what we did here was we spiced them. We summarized it and we spiced, but as you're reading through it, think about this is how are they related to one another, right? But first thing is when you are going through these documents, group them, similarities, differences, right? You could group them, elements of spice. That's the first step. If you're doing that, you could craft a good thesis and then start to organize your DBQ. We're going to be doing this every week. We're going to be going through documents. So when it comes down this time, by the end of, when we get to May 15th, I'm very confident that we will all be scoring up there in the 8s, 9s, and 10s, right? Questions for me at all? Any questions? All right. So what you just want to make sure to have for Thursday is try your best, like I said, use those resources, use the AMSCO book, use the websites, do some active studying. So that way we'll do the same thing is we'll spend some time reviewing content for period 3, then we're going to go ahead and do some more DBQ practice because I'm very confident you'll do well. But that's it. We're finished for today. Just write down here so I know who's here. If you're going to be here next session, excellent. You could help me out with the DBQ practice.